Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about the behind the scenes of being a channel. This title came in during a meditation. That's often how I decide what I'm going to record. I am meditating, and by meditating, I mean just talking to the guides, and they'll just show me a title, and then I know to go into it. And that's how I do a lot of things, actually, just in general. Like, I never plan out content ahead of time. I'll usually get the title, and then I know just to bring the frequency of that title forward, and then the rest gets channeled through. Anyway, that's just a little side note. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like being a channel in this episode, because it's definitely like a different lifestyle. And I was watching this show about channels. I watched like an episode and I thought, wow, this is so interesting. Like, I know when I first started channeling, I wanted to kind of just learn about how it felt for other people and what their experience was like. So anyway, I thought this would be interesting. I just want to talk about some of the things I navigate that are unique. And yeah, I guess it will just serve you how it's meant to, which is something I want to talk about in the episode. So, for reference, when I'm talking about being a channel in this episode, to me, the word channel means a lot of different things. You know, I've talked about that before on the show. Channeling, I see it as like a broad term. In this specific episode, I'm talking about trance channeling, allowing the entities to move through me, because it is a very unique experience. I've talked about this before, but it is very different than, to me, doing different types of psychic work, intuitive work, mediumship work. It's just a very different thing, a very unique thing. So I just want to preface with, I'm talking about trance channeling in this episode specifically. You know, if somebody asks me what channeling means, I usually offer a broader definition. I think, we all channel in our own way whenever we're in that flow state, wherever we are just like doing what we are meant to do, a speaker on the stage and it's just flowing through them. Whenever we're out of that mechanical thought process and just allowing our higher self to move through us, and it just feels like pure flow, that's channeling. A basketball player on the court, an artist, painting, wherever you feel like you are just in your zone and you are beyond thought, it's just your higher self, it's just source moving through you, is what I consider to be channeling. So we all channel in different ways at different times. I channel my books, but to me, pretty much every author is channeling something. So there's a broader definition. And then even if I am intuiting the way that I consciously channel on the podcast or on YouTube, that's also channeling. It's just consciously channeling. And there's a lot of different terms for channeling. And I'll just share like the ones I use, so I'll say consciously channeling if I am connecting with the frequency and I'm still present, but I'm kind of relaying, acting as the in-between. There's direct voice channeling, where the person isn't fully in trance, but the entity is speaking through them directly, but the person's also there. I consider that direct voice channeling. There's trance channeling, where you are in a trance-like state and having your own experience like in another dimension, and the being is using the vessel to communicate through you. And I do all different forms, so I can channel in all those different ways, and that is kind of what I want to talk about in this episode, because like I said, it's a very unique experience. So behind the scenes of being a channel, I want to talk about what it was like for me opening up to this, and start from the beginning in case you haven't heard this before. So sorry if you already have, but just for context, I was very tapped in as a kid. I hung out with ETs in my bedroom every night. I was hanging out with ascended masters. I was seeing a lot of things. And for me, it's not just in my mind's eye. So, all of my psychic gifts are open from a young age. They were all open. And the clairvoyance for me isn't just in my mind's eye. I do have that type of clairvoyance, but I also see things very physically, typically in hologram form. I've had, visitations with ETs and ascended masters in physical form as well, where I can very much touch them and they're not like transparent. So that has happened as well. And I was very used to energies being in my room, seeing energy fields everywhere, you know, moving through the world and just seeing things that I thought everybody could see very physically around me that other people definitely didn't. Then, you know, there came the point, of course, where I shut it off. And I think I just repressed a lot of that. I repressed a lot of that. And over the years, I can think about different times when I was teased for it or told I was crazy about the things I was seeing. And I would say, no, it's literally right there. There's like a person right next to you. And other people weren't seeing it, you know? And so I was told I was crazy, but then there was really more of a, just like a traumatic experience that popped me on my body. That's what I call it. And everything just kind of turned off. And I repressed a lot of what I remembered as a kid, or what I experienced as a kid rather. And then I moved through my life and I was definitely very, very intuitive. It just came through in a very different way. It was a lot of being an empath, being clairsentient. I felt things really intensely and I just knew things. You know, it was a lot more claircognizant, clairsentient. It was the clairaudience and the clairvoyance that I had really kind of, you know, turned down and just pushed away a lot of those experiences like as a kid to the point of where I just kind of forgot a lot of them. And wasn't connected to spirituality at all, just living my life super mainstream. And then I guess I could bring my my religious experiences into this because I think this was interesting too. You know, I grew up Catholic and it was interesting to me because I found that like I really connected with certain people, with certain beings that the church talked about because they would come to me in hologram form and I would communicate with them and it was very clear. And then there were other energies that I just like couldn't really connect with. And you know, now I understand it was because those are still a lot of the same beings that I work with now, different ascended masters, different like guides I have that I work with now. And that's why they were coming through. It's just really interesting for me to look back on who I connected with, in terms of like when I went to Catholic school and to grow up Catholic, and then how there were other people who I just like couldn't really connect with. You know, I felt it was interesting because I actually felt really, really connected to Jesus because I would see Jesus, I would talk to him. That was very easy for me, but I couldn't really connect to God in the same way, you know, and this is just thinking from my younger perspective. And I couldn't wrap my head around like why I couldn't connect to God in the same way. And it was because like I was connecting very much like with beings, and God's source is like a large essence. It didn't have a physical form, you know, and I was expecting it to be like a man in the sky. And I was like, how come I can't really connect to God? And of course I got in trouble for saying that. You know, I could talk to Jesus directly. We can all talk to Jesus directly. But anyway, getting off track. So suppress everything. And then fast forward, get into college. I'm dealing with a lot of intense health issues, and those eventually lead me to seeing my first psychic, and I'm just open to whatever. And that sets off this whole cascade of spiritual events. I have a dream. Well, I had a visitation. An angel visited me and told me to become an energy healer. So I start training in energy healing, and pretty much like very quickly when I start doing that, I realize moving energy is super natural for me, super easy for me. I just felt like I'm in my flow state and things just started turning on, you know, so a lot of it just turned on pretty immediately. And over time, things just got stronger and stronger and more turned on. So that was like my clairvoyance turning on, my clairaudience. And as I worked with different spiritual mentors, that continued to open up. Now, I would say I had been working in that capacity, doing psychic work, energy healing work, and channeling more in terms of like talking to the being, whether that be like in my mind's eye, telepathically, or them stepping forward like as holograms, you know. So whenever I am saying I'm consciously channeling, typically first before I sit down and I channel, I have all the guides come in, and the way that I see it, like Christina sees it with her eyes, is that there are like a ton of people in this room around me. So everyone's surrounding me. And I see them all like holograms, and they're talking, you know, so it's not just in my head. It's not just in my mind's eye. That's what I always do before I sit down and start to channel. And, you know, I was doing mediumship work as well, communicating with beings, who had passed over, who maybe needed support transitioning. So I was doing a lot of that work for a while, and it was, I want to say like it was probably about 2 years after that I started channeling. And the only channel I knew of, actually I knew of two. So I had just found out that Abraham Hicks or Esther Hicks was a channel. I had heard things from her here and there. I had friends who would talk about her. I never really got into a lot of Abraham Hicks stuff, but I heard things here and there, or I'd watch like short clips that would pop up. I had never really gone into it. So I had never gone into it super deeply. And I just thought she was a motivational speaker. I had no idea she was channeling. I had no idea she was channeling. And so I just found that out. And then I also had a session with a channel that a friend had recommended, and she was a trance channel. And the way she did energy work was she would drop out of consciousness, and the beings would come forward, and you'd have the whole conversation with them, and they would do the energy work on you. So I had this energy healing session with this other trance channel. So I was like, having that reference point. And then what happened was one day I was just I was meditating one night, and all of a sudden I feel my body drop into this much deeper state of relaxation, and my head kind of just like rolls to the side, and my head is just really loose, so my head's kind of like moving, and I just feel like my whole body is like spaghetti, and there's like energy moving through it. And I felt like how do I describe this? I felt like I was asleep, but I was awake. So like everything was just black, and my mouth starts moving, and I can hear myself talking, but I don't know what I'm saying. I can't hear what I'm saying. And I'm having this whole inner dialogue in my head, and like what I'm seeing in my mind's eye is just black at the time. And I'm having this inner dialogue in my head, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what am I saying? Wait, what's happening? This is really strange. And I'm thinking, I need to record this. What's coming out of my mouth? And I could feel intuitively, like, I think something important's coming out of my mouth. Like, this is so wild. And I'm like, wait, but if I try and grab my phone, then what if I break out of it and I stop talking? And it was like this whole inner dialogue going on. And so I just let it happen, and it felt just really like love. It felt really good. And I was talking for a while, and then it stopped, and then I kind of like woke up, and I thought, whoa, that was interesting. And then the next night it happened again. And then and it was kind of the same dynamic. Like, do I grab my phone? Do I not? And then the next time that it happened again, I did record it. And what was coming out was like really profound and really helpful and really, really good, and I thought, wow, what is this? And so that was kind of like just the first way it came through. It wasn't this aggressive, like something's coming through. But I realized, at the time I was working with different mentors, and I brought up to my mentors, and they helped explain like what was going on. So I was like, okay, I need to learn more about this. And now I'm gonna basically start to work with this more intentionally. So I had talked to different channels who had gone through a similar experience and was getting support there. I started to, because I knew it wanted to come through, I basically started to work with like using it intentionally and like choosing to open up. And at that point, what was happening was I was going into a trance, but I wasn't unable to have my own experience. So then it's, instead of being feeling black to me in my mind's eye, I was having my own visual experience. I was kind of like floating off in another dimension. And I would get the information through visuals, movie scenes, energy fields, whatever, telepathically, vibrationally. I was getting the same information that I was saying, just in a different way, which is why, in the 5D Ascension activator, I have that second video. So I'm channeling the lesson. And then I have another video where I just go deeper into it, and I explain more of what came through for me, because there's overlap in what comes through, but sometimes it's slightly different. So I'm having my own experience of it. So I worked with that and started doing it a lot more, intentionally. And what was happening was, at the time I was still working in nutrition. And as this was growing, I transitioned over into business coaching, and it felt like while I was doing business coaching, I mean, that was really when all of this is really growing behind the scenes. And if any of you were in my containers during that time, I feel like we just talked about spiritual awakenings and channeling and psychic gifts the whole time, which is how the psychic development program was actually born. So what ended up happening was when I was running No BS Biz School, we were just talking about psychic stuff all the time. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to make another program because this is supposed to be business and it's just turning into psychic development. So that's when I decided to start psychic development. It was super organic, but it was during that time that, you know, I was really, really cultivating my relationships with these different beings, with these different entities. So I was getting to know the beings that wanted to speak through me, and that's when, you know, early on the monarch being came through and had told me that they were going to have me write 3 books. They wanted to write 3 books through me that I was going to channel, and they told me the topics and they would tell me when to start. So I got the information really far in advance, and it just felt like a lot of spiritual training and channel training and having that experience for myself and really developing those relationships. And it just was like, you know, what I was spending all my time thinking about and moving through and learning and just navigating that dynamic and the skill, you know, because it is a skill. Like, it was coming through very naturally because it's part of my mission. And I mean, I never expected that to come through, you know? So I know everyone is different, but that was like a totally random thing for me. I didn't even really know what trance channeling was. I learned through this experience. It wasn't something I was seeking out, like it found me. And from there, learning to refine that and work through it and have my boundaries and get really clear and pristine on, you know, allowing the entity to come through, clearing the channel. And so it's grown over time, even just with, you know, like movement. You'll see this over time. I mean, when I first started, I had to move a lot because the energy was so intense moving through me. So my body's moving a lot, my head's moving a lot, and then over time, moving less. And then, you know, being able to over time move to also being able to just direct voice channel and not having to go into trance every time. So it's been this process of refining the technique. And it's also this really personal, sacred experience of really developing relationships with these entities and having so much of what happened for me as a kid really come online again. And just a lot of those memories come up. And the thing is, like, the beings that I channel and that I am scribing for, writing books for, and going to scribe for are beings that I had started developing these relationships with when I was a kid. You know, it's the same entities that I was hanging out with in my bedroom when I was really young. I didn't tell anybody, you know. So uh, it's a group of different light beings, ascended masters, the monarch being, who have been with me for a very long time, and it's a very special relationship, you know. And there's so much that came up for me through that, like having this thing come into my life out of nowhere that I wasn't seeking out, and I didn't know that I wanted to step into. But it felt like this thing within me of like, obviously this isn't a coincidence, and I feel like my destiny or my mission is being laid out in front of me. But what if I don't want this? Like, do I really have a choice? And there are so many times where I felt like I didn't have a choice, because every time that I tried to avoid it, I would get really aggressively veered onto a different path, you know. So a lot of it's through my physical body having really bad physical symptoms, chronic illness symptoms, vertigo, vision going away, intense pain, fatigue, not being able to get out of bed. Like, when I have been pursuing other paths, that is a way that my higher self gets me back in alignment. It's like, hey, this isn't where you're supposed to be. So your body is going to scream at you, no, like, go in a different direction. And my body, like, straight up won't function until I get back on track and channel again, you know. And they told me early on, they're like, the more you channel, the more your body will heal. And so it's very obvious to me with my physical body, and just feeling like my body does not work if I am getting out of alignment, if I'm off track. There was a period earlier on where the guides would just come in. You know, I'd be in the middle of a call and they would just come in. I was like, this is not going to work. They can't just come in. And they were trying to get my attention because I, you know, have gone through periods where I rejected it and I wasn't creating space to allow them to move through. And so they were like, yo, you can't avoid this. You know, they would come in. And I had a lot of that in the last year. Actually, it was different. They weren't just coming in, but what was happening was anytime I would get on video or go to record a podcast, I would get really, really dizzy and sometimes like faint or pass out, or like just, I mean, I couldn't get on video. And it made it like really hard for me to plan things or keep up with my normal schedule. And so like this last year, I had a lot of that very physical resistance because they didn't want me like consciously channeling. They wanted to say something. So they'll get my attention and like, I will literally feel like I'm going to pass out. And it's like, hey, get into trance because we want to come through. So, you know, I think like one of the biggest things that channeling has taught me, or rather is teaching me, is around surrender. And I think that the level of surrender that's required to channel is something that is very difficult to explain on a number of levels. First of all, just to be able to allow them to move through you, to be a clear channel and to get completely out of the way. There is so much personal work. There's so much like shadow work, ego work, like a lot of things that I have been doing beforehand just for my own wellness that was actually also prep for me to be able to bring the energies through. And even like to this day, you know, whenever I'm going to channel something, if there's any piece of me that could get in the way, they give me the life experiences to knock the energy around so that I can get fully out of the way, you know? So just think about allowing yourself to completely step out and allow a being to speak through you. And there is fear that can come up of like, okay, so something's speaking through me and it's not me. And what if people like hold me accountable for what they say? You know, or I was explaining it to a friend, like, imagine somebody else wrote a book and said, hey, you can't change anything in here. I'm going to put your name on it as the author and you're not allowed to change anything. We're publishing it. A lot of people would have a lot of anxiety about that, right? You're like, well, what if I don't agree with what is said in there? Well, what if I wouldn't say it that way? Well, what if I don't want that published? You know, and that's part of like the work of being a channel. When I'm channeling books, like, and I'm quote unquote editing them, there are things that I'm like, oh, I'd probably say that differently, or do I want to include that? Do I want to go there? And like my job though is to not change anything, like just fix the spelling, fix the punctuation so that people can read it. You know, just be like a physical vessel for this to move through, but it's not like time for my opinion, you know? And so there can be different times where my opinion comes through. But that's, you know, part of what is required. Like that's surrender in your life, you know, and just like physically, like allowing your body to be in the state of purely like letting something else move through you, and the relationship that needs to be developed for that to work really well. Like there's a deep state of surrender, just technique wise, but then also just in life. And I think for me, where it becomes difficult is actually more of upholding the boundaries with other people, you know. And I think we live in a world where there's a lot of pressure to like show up on a certain timeline, or like, well, can you tell me when this is going to happen? Or can we do this regularly? And the thing is, like, when my job is just being a channel, I'm not controlling like when they want to come through or what wants to come through. And I think for me, I've had to really balance the pressure I feel externally of other people, like, you know, wanting certain things to come through on a certain timeline, and I can't control it, you know? So it's like very logistically, I can't tell you that they're going to want to come through tomorrow at 8 a.m. for me to record whatever it is, you know. Like I have to just kind of create open space for myself so that when it comes through, it comes out. Because I always say it's like, it feels like it's like you have to pee. Like you can't just hold it. It's like, I have to pee now. Right. Or like, when you're having a baby, you're like, my water broke. Like I'm having the baby now. Like this is happening right now. And that's how it feels to like have a book come through, or when there's a big transmission that wants to come through, it's like, it's happening right now. So like, if I have something else on my calendar, like it's happening right now. And if I don't do it right then, I miss it, but a lot of where I had a lot of personal resistance because of my like type A personality is, me wanting to have my schedule all tidy and neat and accommodate other people, and also like accommodate, the left brain part of me, and be like, okay, yeah, I'll channel this or do this on this date at this time. Great. Or every Tuesday or whatever, every month I'm going to do this. And anytime I try and plan it, like we're going to do this every month or every week, it never works out because I'll come and it's blank, and I think that's the thing is like, I don't control them. And with that is like the information that comes through, like I don't control it, and so sometimes I have to articulate how like I'm not in control. And there are certain times when, I'm asking questions and the guides just won't answer. And I think that, well, I know that's a big reason why, honestly, some people can do this work and some people can't, because the type of person that wants to force or push out certain information or grab at it, they're not clear channels typically, or they can't be a clear channel until they allow themselves to surrender and just what wants to move through. And I feel that energy like a lot around me. And sometimes the way that people ask questions, it's like this grabby energy of like, I need to know this right now. And the guides are like, well, maybe that's not what we want to say. So it has really taught me to like, I have to release control. And it's something that I am learning every single day. And I bump up against of like, I have to release control. Like I don't get to decide what they say or when they want to come in. Like I have to just create the space for that to be possible. And it's something I'm working on. Like as we speak, I feel like this is the biggest thing, working with like my team and my mentors to really figure out like, how can I create as much space as possible so I can really honor when they want to come through. Because I just really can't, force it, and sometimes I don't want to channel because I can like almost feel this grabby energy from other people. And like, I already know the guides just aren't even gonna go there, so that's the thing is everybody channels differently, and depending on the entity you're channeling, something different will come through. And so I'm not like choosing that. I know like, the beings that I channel and the frequency that they're at, they are like, they always say like, we're beyond time and space. Anytime I try and pull them into a timeline, like what happened here? Well, can you give me specifics on this? They just don't answer. They're like, we're literally not in a timeline. Like, that's not why we're here. That's not the type of information we're here to share with you. And I'm just like, okay, so like, what is it that you are here to share with me? And so when I'm channeling different ascended masters, for example, I'm not channeling an incarnation of them. I am tapping into that vibration, that essence. So you could consider it the oversoul. And so sometimes I just feel like kind of silly whenever I try and ask something that's like more 3D, and they'll either just like laugh and they're like, yeah, no, or they'll be like, yeah, which timeline, which reality? Like, because there's infinite. And I'm like, shit. Okay, I guess that question isn't the right question. And I've learned a lot about like what's a better question and what's more precise question, what's actually a helpful question for me just through communicating with them, because there are a lot of things I might ask and they just won't answer. Like, no, we're not going there. Notice where you're trying to bring us down. And is that actually the correct question? And I think one of the things that's really been so beautiful for me about this experience is they have really taught me a lot about like self-empowerment and not outsourcing my power or knowing to them, because they just literally won't play. Like they won't play that game. And I will say that's something that I have been certainly cautious of. And, they're like telling me like, it's not my responsibility. But I think that sometimes when people are channeling information from other entities or other dimensions, people can have like kind of like sometimes they can like give their power away to that being, and that's not the being's intention for communicating. And like, that's not something I want as a channel. Like they want to empower us to tap into our own intuition and trust ourselves and trust our own inner knowing. And so there's this balance there, because like I can't control how people relate to the information that's channeled, but like sometimes people will just almost start to like outsource to, well, what does the monarch being say? Well, I want to know what the guide says. And it's not from a place of just curiosity. It's a place of, well, whatever they say is what I'm going to believe. And then the guides, like, that's not the point. That's not what they want, which is why it's really interesting for me. And what I really love is a lot of times, when I'm channeling, the guides will just ask questions back because they're like, we're not playing this game. Notice where you are trying to give away your power, your sense of knowing. So that is what's been really beautiful for me, and also just like a learning lesson for me of, it's not, I can't control how other people are going to relate to it. And my job is just to let it move through me, so I think like my human can really get in the way a lot. And so my work is to really surrender and release control and let them drive when it's time to drive. So I think for me, it's about releasing control, surrender, and just trusting the process. I think the thing that's really unique about channeling that I love is I feel like you do get this when you're consciously channeling a bit, but it's a totally different thing when you're in trance. So I feel like the real value of it being in trance, which I battled with for a long time. And I've gone through phases where I don't go into trance and I don't let them talk through me directly, because I'm like, well, why does it matter who's saying it? Like, as long as the information is coming through, why does it matter if Goddess Isis, you come through, or the monarch being, you come through? Like, why do you need to be communicating through me? Why can't I just relay what you're saying? What's the difference? And there is a big difference, and it's because it's a frequency that's getting transmitted. So they talk about this in Manifestation Mastery, my first book, but it's more about the vibration that you feel than even the content of the words themselves. So you can think of like every word, every sentence is like a zip file, it's like a vibrational packet, and they're just using that sentence, which often, like, channel information is often like super simple. And so if you look at it from just a content perspective, like word for word, there's a lot of value in it, but the real potency actually is like when you feel the words and you feel the frequency transmitted and all of the information that you're actually receiving with that. So maybe a sentence is coming through, but because they're able to use me as a physical vessel, that entity is able to ground in their frequency and transmit a whole vibration that you will feel, and that will unlock codes and information within you. And I know I feel that, right? So that's why I always say, like, in the morning, as part of my frequency work, I teach this in the Channel Collective membership about how to do daily frequency work, but I always start my day off with a piece of high frequency content. And so that can look different every day, but often, I could just throw on a channeled message in the background. I don't even listen to what they're saying. It literally doesn't matter. Like, I don't even know what it's about. I'm like doing my hair or my makeup, getting dressed, putting on my clothes, and it's in the background, but it doesn't even matter that I know what it's saying, because I'm basically receiving energy work and an energetic transmission. And I notice that after that happens, I just have insights, I have downloads, I feel different because I'm receiving that frequency, and it's just gotten grounded in the physical. And so that was a really important thing for me to understand about, like, why I needed to do it. Because it's not just about like content or information, because I don't need to go into trance to convey what they're saying. Like, they're talking to me. Like, if you're sitting here across from me, I can hear you. I can just say that. I can just repeat what they're saying, but it's about them actually being able to use the physical vessel to ground in the vibration. And when you watch a channeled video, or especially if you're in person and can feel that, like, the potency, the energy is so high. It is energy work. It is powerful, powerful stuff, so for me to understand that was really, really important. The other thing, like, that's been really important for me, and this is, I think, also why I'm grateful that I channel more than one entity. A lot of channels have like a main entity that they work with, maybe two or three, and I have like a lot of entities. I mean, I have a good amount of people I channel, and it's just funny because, you know, for a while, I would always just say to my mentor, like, just because I can channel doesn't mean this needs to be like my life. Like, and she was like, Christina, I've never met anyone that can channel that many ascended masters and they're just doing it as like a side hobby. And I was like, good point. But I'm glad about that, because I think what's really important to me is that people understand I am not the guides. And I feel like I look at other channels and the way people see them, and people think that the channel like is the being. And I don't think that's like anyone's fault. I think that's just important for me that people understand, like, when information is flowing through me or I'm channeling a being, like, I am not that. I'm different, you know, like, they're moving through me and I'll say like they're a part of me, like they flow through me. And sometimes like we're moving together, but I do like this idea of like there is Christina as Christina and there's the monarch being. And at this point, like the monarch being is in me, like we're together, but I can also access like separately the Christina frequency. And that's important because I think it's really valuable to see different perspectives. It's like when I have a question or I want to learn more, I will call forward multiple different beings and get slightly different perspectives, and then also feel into like, well, how does this feel for me? And you know, what do I want to do? What do I think? But also, so like for people to understand, like I am learning always. So I read Manifestation Mastery, I read the channel content, I listen back, things flow through me, and then I listen back and I'm learning all the time. You know, I'm doing this work alongside like all of us, and just I always am having realizations, and it's a very hard to articulate experience to have all this information flowing through me and also have access to it and have that level of knowing, but also like the human part of me doesn't necessarily know it yet. And I have to like learn it. And I have my own human stuff and my own resistance. And like, you know, I'm listening to what they're saying. And I'm like, damn it, that was such a call out. Like I needed to hear that, even though I'm the one channeling it. So that's really important, like for me to get across to people of like, you know, I'm processing this too, and I'm learning alongside you. I'm exploring it all as well, which is really cool and fun, and keeps life exciting for me, honestly. Keeps life exciting. That is something that's really important to me, because like I think when I first started, I was like, well, I don't want people to think I am the guides, you know, or even just with the book, you know, a lot of people will just skip the intro and just start reading it. And I'm like, well, this isn't like me. Like, this is how I would write it. I wouldn't write it that way. I'd write it probably in better English, better grammar, different style. Like my voice is different, but that's what it is to be a channel, you know? And that's why I think it's cool to kind of get to know the different personalities of the different entities, because you can see a clear difference and you can like feel a clear difference. Other things. I wrote some notes, so I'm just looking at what other things I wanted to say. Other dynamics of being a channel that I wanted to share. And, you know, I'll say I have really good boundaries with this kind of stuff, but the more this has become a part of me and the more it's come to the forefront, and especially like after my walk-in and the integration and the beings kind of like very much sharing the vessel more than ever before, I am getting so much input like all the time, and it's more triggered. It's more like triggered by certain things, you know? So I have really good boundaries where I'm not getting overloaded all the time with information. Like, so I can do my human thing, and, you know, I'll sit down and say, all right, guys, come on in. And the holograms pop up. But there will be times when like the guides that I channel really want to say something. And so I'll be in a conversation, and they're just like popping in. And I think something that's hard for me that I don't even bother articulating, because it's like, I don't know, but a lot of times people will be asking me questions or saying things, and I'm literally like, the guides are like screaming in my ear, like, something specific, or I'm like literally seeing it around people. Sometimes my friends will ask me something and I'm like, well, there's a cord that's connected to this and that's what's causing your energy drain. And they're like, maybe, but I don't really think. And I'm like, no, I'm not like just like saying that as Christina. I'm literally telling you right now, I'm like literally seeing this come off your body, or I'm like literally seeing this energy over here. Like it's like it's in the physical and there's a backpack on your back. I can see it. And sometimes it's hard for me to express, or like I'll share things and people think I'm just sharing my opinion, and I'm like, this is literally like your guide. I'm seeing just as clear as you standing right next to you, and this is what they're saying to me. So I have to like articulate that, and often for me it's like been this boundary thing where for a long time when that was coming, like I just wouldn't even allow that to come through, or I would just ignore it. But now, because a lot of these energies are like embedded in my system now, which happened like through the walk-in, like through the physical body integration, like they move through me, and I don't have to go into trance for them to come through. I can access the consciousness. It's like downloaded into my system. What will happen a lot more is the second someone asks me a question, I'm just getting the information not from me. Like before Christina can even process it or think about it or like share my opinion, I have like 5 entities that are giving me a perspective. And I think also just because my clairvoyance is so like, it's not just a mind's eye thing. It's like I'm very much seeing it in the physical. I'm seeing energy fields. I can see, your aura, and I'm seeing I'm just seeing it all go on. To me, it's like so crystal clear. I'm not saying like, I definitely don't know everything, but when I'm in conversation with, people I love and they're like asking me things and I'm like, no, I'm not like guessing that's what's going on here. Like I'm telling you, like I'm literally seeing this cord coming off of you, or there's like a shackle wrapped around that ankle. And I'm seeing it just as if it was in the 3D physical. That is something that is a really interesting dynamic for me to navigate. Just the more it's opened up, and just like how they always want to come, like the guides like so often want to come through, and I don't necessarily want them to come through. And I think for me there's been like a fear of like I don't want to lose myself in it. Like I don't want to lose myself in it. I don't want it just to be like all about them. They're laughing at me right now. They're literally like, trust us, it couldn't be all about us even if we do. Because I think that the guides, the guides have a certain frequency that it's like an old soul kind of energy that can feel very serious. Like they laugh, they joke, they screw around, but I feel like a lot of the spiritual stuff can get so heavy. And why I like to relay it is because I feel like I can relay a lot of things in a funnier way often, just because my personality is like goofball, like dry humor, sarcasm. So I feel like it can land a lot easier. And I think it's nice to have the balance. Like even for me, like if I am always in trance, it can just feel really serious, because we talk about a lot of like very serious, like big life topics. And I love going deep like that. I love deep conversation, but I also like to just like, we got to get some lightness, it's like, I think it's also nice to have a balance of like, yeah, these are my favorite hair care products, like just so it's not so intense all the time, because for me, otherwise it just gets a little bit too heavy as well. But anyway, I kind of got off on a tangent, just explaining like how, like that I'm seeing things like very much, it's not in the 3D, but it is in the 3D, if that makes sense. Like I'm seeing the hologram. I'm seeing the entity. They look like see-through holograms, basically. I'm seeing the cords, I'm seeing the aura, I'm seeing the energy. And I'm getting a lot of input all the time, which I have found I'm still like navigating this, if I need to draw even stronger boundaries, because if you are like quad right, or it's like ADHD brain, squirrel brain, whatever it is, if you're the personality type where like one thing in my environment that comes in will just throw me off track. Like I have squirrel brain. Imagine when you have squirrel brain and you have like 10 different ascended masters giving you input all the time, right? Like I really, really have to be clear with my boundaries. With that, I will say, I have gotten even more sensitive to technology, and balancing that is important. So just because the energy is so high and intense, a lot of technology can like blow a lot. So I break a lot of things. And sometimes this happens like I've gone to people's houses and it's like all their tech stops. Stove won't work, TV goes black, like speakers stop working. I mean, this happens, and it happens in my own house, and even just in this recording. I mean, I have had to stop like 600 times because the speaker like blew out. And it's not just a computer thing. So I can break a lot of technology, and also because the energy that's coming through is so intense. Then when I'm also adding in other stimuli, like I'm just adding in the screen, I'm adding in the EMFs, it can be so much for my physical body. I like really have to manage that. And, it's similar for me, even just with energy work, like the more that the higher the frequency is that I'm channeling, whether it's energy work or allowing a being to move through me, writing a book, it's really like being an electricity rod, and it can be very tiring. And so the amount of like I really need so much more rest, and I have to really take care of my body in a pristine way. And I like have seen the effects of like how exhausted I get if I'm not super clear with my boundaries, or like, when I have my human moment and I eat food that's maybe not super clean, and like what that is to my vessel and how much harder it is for me, so I have to really manage my time. And once again, this goes back to like boundaries and people asking for more of me. And I just like really, I like physically can't, like sometimes I just can feel so fried. I have to balance it out with like relaxing and resting and meditating and just being, because an hour on a video for me can often just feel like that was the same as if I was on Zoom calls for 10 hours in the day. So the energy management piece has been another aspect of it. And especially with, food and energy management, that's an important conversation I have to have like with my guides. And so over time, what I have needed to eat or how I've needed to support my body so that the vessel can be clear for them to come in has had to like shift and change. And so there are times when like I, need to adjust my nutrition or my sleep or just my lifestyle so that it's easy for them to come in. I mean, even when I sat down to record this, to be totally honest, I try and record things in the middle of the day because, the light's good, it's easy to see. And they were just like, yeah, we don't really like middle of the day. We like evening and early morning. Like, oh, and I feel like this is such a classic psychic thing. Like when I'm really following my flow of like, when does it want to come in? It's always like super late at night or super early in the morning. And so those are things like I have to, look at just with managing my energy level. What compromises can I make with the guides? When do they want to come through? And it's a very different way of living. Like I think about if there was no one else involved, what would I do? And it's like I would do nothing until whenever they wanted to come through. And I'm like, they probably would always be coming through at like 10 p.m. and there would be like a 3-hour transmission, and that would be like how it would come through. And there's maybe I'll transition to that. Maybe I will just start doing my like late night recordings. That's just how it's going to be. I don't know, but it goes back to the release and control and the surrender piece. And with my business and what flows through and even my offerings, like I literally can't force it. Like I literally can't force it, and people are like, well, when are you going to launch this? Well, like, can they talk about this? And it's like, I, I, I can't control it. I really can't control it. You know, I don't control them, and they also don't control me, but we are working together, right? So I can't be like, hey, I need you to come in right now. And usually they will when I ask them to come through, but it's more like when they have something really important to say, like they're like, now it has to come out right now, right? So then I gotta get it out, and that's not always at the most like convenient time for me, um human wise. So then I just need to get out of my own way and make the space for it. So let me see, is there anything else I wanted I wanted to share about behind the scenes of being a channel. I mean, let me know if like this is interesting to you. My process has definitely changed over time. Um, I wish I could describe to people like what the experience is like, and it's such a sacred, magical thing for me. Wow, I'm like getting emotional. Um, Holy shit. It's like such a sacred thing for me that sometimes that's like why I, over the years have like pulled back, because I'm like, this is like so sacred and magical. I don't want anybody like throwing energy at this, or like even giving an opinion, because like the second you say things publicly, everybody thinks that that's you asking for an opinion, but it is what it is. And I think I feel really protective over them, because like the vibration, you guys, like when I'm channeling, it's just fucking pure love. Like just pure love, like ecstasy, like orgasmic, like just like pure fucking love. I don't know how else to describe it. Like I feel so, it's like you're so high. Like you just feel like I'm flying on love, like just love. It feels so good. It like brings me to tears so often when I'm just channeling like for myself. Like I'm crying just of joy, of happiness, of love. It's unlike anything like I've experienced outside of it. And it's super magical, and I just, after I channel, I feel like just high and like I could do anything. And I think because I know how it feels for me, and like the intentions behind the transmission, and like these beings I channel that I have a really close relationship with, you have to like basically share a vessel with another entity. They're like, the best way I can describe it is like it's like like parental energy. They don't like, I mean, I don't know. They're there for me, right? And it's a very close relationship. I know it might sound strange, but it's like a spirit guides. It's pure unconditional love. And because like I know that, and even I think about times when I was a kid, like when I was young, and I mean my guides like had my back, had my back. And they've been there for me always. And so I get kind of like protective, you know? Um, anyway, it's a gift for me. It's also a big challenge for me. And just the most like random fucking thing. Like I never thought my life was going to be this. I never thought my life was going to be this. I never thought I was going to have like a career in spirituality, but like let's leave that out of it. I never thought I was going to be like a psychic or an energy healer. Like that seems like so out of left field, let alone like be a channel like this. um I I never thought that this would happen. And I kind of, we talked about this a little bit if you listen to my episode with Robin, like can anyone channel? And speaking as me, I shared in in that episode, like I believe everybody is psychic and everybody should open up their gifts, but I think the way that people's gifts open and what that's like is going to be different for everybody. And it's like not everybody's going to see holograms around them like the way that I do. They're just not. Um, I think that we all can channel in terms of like where are we in our flow state, but do I think that everybody like I feel like I personally believe this is it's a very specific contract that like finds you, and I think that actually where people get sometimes, not always, but people can get into trouble when they're trying to force channeling. And that's where often sometimes people can like open themselves up to energies that aren't super pure or clear. And it goes back to just intuition. Like if you're grabbing for the information, typically that's when people accidentally like infuse their own opinions into it, or like what they want it to be into it, versus like when it's just coming through out of nowhere and you're receiving, not trying to grab. When you're just receiving it, it's like, okay, that's pure, it just dropped in. So I think for me, and kind of rationalizing this as I think about and over the last few years, you know, I've had so many moments of like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to do this. I mean, I have I have a lot of other skills I could make a whole career around. You know, I think about, I'm like, I could drop everything and I could just pursue Quartz, the product line. Like I could just focus on writing books that don't need to be channeled. I could write other books. I mean, I had a super successful career as a nutritionist and a super successful career as a business coach. I've done a lot of consulting. Like I'm really good at brand building. I'm like, I could be a social media manager. Like there's so many things that I feel very confident. I mean, I would be good at. I'm like, I've gotten so many incredible like job opportunities. Like so many people have come up to me and given me amazing job offers, right? And I think like, I mean, there's so many things I could do, but like, and they would probably feel easier for me emotionally, but I wouldn't be in alignment because like this was the contract. Like, and anytime I go in another direction because it seems easier for me emotionally, my body is like, hard no, no way. And it actually ends up being harder. It actually ends up being harder. You know, so that's something I think about a lot of like, sometimes we have the most resistance around our real mission. But the thing is, it's like part of it being our mission is because it challenges us the most and it calls us up in the biggest ways. And it empowers us like through that, you know, through all those lessons and through that growth. And this is the thing that for sure keeps me growing and is like the most challenging thing. Gotta, you know, do a lot of work all the time. Like I think that's the biggest thing for me. I have, you know, multiple mentors. I'm always doing work on myself and just like exploring myself and my shadow. And like I'm always learning and growing and checking my blind spots, and I have to, so that I don't get in the way. So it's a consistent like dedication to the process, and like a requirement for me to bring things through. You know, I have to have really intense boundaries, and you know, sometimes the things that I want on an ego level, like as just Christina, my humanness isn't necessarily what is going to work for me to be able to bring this stuff through. You know, I was explaining this to somebody else. I'm like, one night of shitty sleep, like I literally can't do my job the next day. Like I literally can't. You know, it's not like I can the next day kind of screw around and just like, yeah, I'm just gonna answer emails, or I can get through that Zoom call. Like everything I do is deep work. You know what I mean? If I'm like super zonked, I'm not feeling good, I can't like allow it in, you know? So it's a very sacred process. And it's definitely like, it's definitely why I live the way I live. And, yeah, it's pretty much what I have to say about it. Let me know if you have more questions about this. Yeah, the guides just put this one forward and they were like, this is the podcast. So if you have more questions about the process or what it's like, let me know. You know, I know when I first started doing psychic work and then when I first started channeling, I just really wanted to know like all the details. I feel like you see all these different like intuitives and channels, and it's like, what is their life like though? You know, I'm always like what's their life like though? Like what do they eat? Like what's their morning routine? Like what are you doing during the day? Like how do you manage your time? Like what's your human stuff? Like I think that's so fascinating, you know, to like know the person behind the being or the work. And I think that's something that I really want to like bring forward in doing this work of like, okay, there's all this, but then there's also me. And, you know, I'm like in my 20s and I'm a channel and I do normal shit too. And I like go out dancing at the club and like you know, I do all that stuff too. And so how do you find the balance? And I feel like that's really what's cool about this time, and so many more people stepping into their mission and their gifts and realizing like this gets to be a whole lifestyle and it gets to be fun and you get to have all aspects of it, versus like the spiritual stuff being this like woo woo thing where, you know, you have to live away from society and can't talk to anybody. So I like sharing behind the scenes. I think that's the most fun part for sure, because I always think about like, what do I want to ask other people who do something similar. Like, I mean, everybody. I am obsessed with knowing about like behind the scenes of people's lives, like different entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders, channel speakers. Like I want to know like their lifestyle. Is that just me? Am I the only person that think this is interesting? Because I feel like it's the lifestyle that sets the stage for them to be able to do what they do. You know, like what is your life like? That's interesting to me. So anyway, if I can offer that, I'm happy to. I'm a pretty open book here. Let me just see, anything else guides want to pop in and all? They're happy that I did this. And they are saying to make sure you send in questions so they can share perspectives and have a party through conversations. Love that. Love that. Thank you. All right. So if you do have questions, follow-up questions, anything for the podcast, be sure to submit it at christinathechannel.com/pod, P-O-D. You can submit it right there. That way it's all organized for me and my team. And if you did enjoy this episode, be sure to take a screenshot, share it to social media, tag me, tag at Christina the Channel Podcast, so we can see that you are enjoying it. And it means the world when you do share the show, because that helps us grow our community. And I want to get this information out to as many people as possible. So I appreciate all the shares. I appreciate you. And just thank you for listening. All right, that's going to be it for today. Thanks again so much for tuning in. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And I'll chat with you again next time.